Sarah is in her first semester of the MFA program, having graduated with a double major in English and popular music from William Patterson University. Sarah's two main passions in life are writing and performing. In July, Sarah released her debut novel, a new adult mystery called At Least She Can Sleep, with R.K. Leighton Publishing. The book is available on Amazon or can be bought directly from Sarah. In her spare time, Sarah loves to cook, perform, and listen to country music, and spend time with her dog, Scarlett. Welcome, Sarah.
The walls of white were caving in on Natalie as she slowly opened her eyes. "Where am I?" she asked groggily. The blood pressure cuff on her arm held the answer she was searching for. She slowly sat up in the back of the ambulance, hoping that it had all just been some terrible nightmare. "Is Darren okay?" "Miss Reynolds, our main concern right now is your health," the paramedic next to her responded. "How are you feeling?" Natalie looked up at the paramedic, whose salt and pepper beard reminded her of her history of linguistics professor. "I'm fine. Really, can I go now?" The paramedic retreated, gently removing the cuff from Natalie's arm. "Remember to drink plenty of fluids," he stated, handing her a bottle of water. In this case, it was probably just the shock, but you can never be too careful. Natalie nodded as he spoke, but she couldn't get her mind to focus long enough to listen. Where was Darren? Had she really just walked in his room and found him holding a bloody knife? Or had she fainted during the fire alarm and dreamt the rest? Yes, she decided, that had to be it. She stepped out of the back of the ambulance to find herself in the same courtyard she had spent dozens of hours in throughout her time at college, but this time it was different. Police cars and a second ambulance lined the entrance to her building with students standing around the perimeter of police tape. Natalie felt a flutter in her stomach, and it was only when she saw Priya, in conversation with a police officer, crying, that she realized that she hadn't been dreaming. Tears soaked her face as she struggled to gain movement in her legs that now felt like jelly. Despite the out-of-body feeling that overcame her body, Natalie found herself making her way to the police officer and Priya. Priya rushed to Natalie and wrapped her in a hug, yet again confirming her worst nightmare come true. "He's dead?" Natalie asked in a whisper, but Priya couldn't even muster up a response. She just nodded her head up and down and let her tears fall down Natalie's shoulder. "What happened?" Natalie asked, her mind flashing back to the bloody knife in Darren's hand. It couldn't be. She wouldn't even allow herself to think that way. They think it was a suicide," Priya stuttered. "This can't be happening," she cried. Priya wasn't as close with Darren as Natalie, having only hung out with him on a few occasions, but that didn't take away the heartache. It was still a loss to the third-floor family. It was still a dead body that they had seen before their very eyes. The flashing of the red and blue lights caught everyone's attention as another police car arrived on the scene, but Natalie didn't glance over. She didn't care. She knew better than to think Darren would end his own life. He had been a bit off these past few days, but not enough to lead to this. At least she didn't think so. A lanky police officer stepped out of the newly arrived car and, after briefly chatting with another officer, walked over to Natalie and Priya. "Miss Reynolds, Miss Singh, I'm Officer Mitchell. I was told that you two are the ones that found the body." His words hung there in the air. Neither girl responded. All Natalie could think about was the fact that he said body. Darren was no longer a person to them. He was a body, a cold, lifeless body. After a moment of silence, Natalie mustered up a quick nod to the officer. "I know this is difficult," Officer Mitchell said, "but it would be very helpful if you could just tell us what you saw." Natalie flashed back to the moment they saw Darren, sitting still in the chair, and the same cold stiffness she felt when she had touched his shoulder resurfaced on her fingertips. She took a sip of her water to calm herself as Priya told Officer Mitchell about the fire alarm and how they had decided to check on Darren on their way back inside. "Officer Mitchell," Natalie started. The officer and Priya both turned their attention to her, realizing this was the first time she had spoken up. "Is it true? Did Darren kill himself?" Officer Mitchell drew in a breath and hesitated. In the police lights and street lamps that lined the roadway, he looked much older than his 32 years. His face was framed with thick-rimmed glasses and some stubble that didn't exactly make him look any younger. Natalie thought he looked to be about her parents' age. He searched for the right words to say. "We really can't discuss the details right now." "Please," Natalie pleaded, desperation in her voice. She shook her head, and just as Officer Mitchell began to speak, her body started shaking uncontrollably. He and Priya each grabbed one of Natalie's arms and directed her over to the stairs leading up to Harrison Hall. Priya held Natalie's arms as they sat down on the second step. "Take a deep breath, Nat." A mixture of thoughts flooded Natalie's mind. She was distraught over the loss of her friend, her gentle giant, her partner in crime. He was gone forever. She felt embarrassed. The police officers and paramedics should be focusing on Darren, she told herself. They shouldn't be wasting time on me just to make sure I'm okay. She cupped her face in her hands and sat there, still as a statue. Miss Reynolds, again, I'm very sorry for your loss, Officer Mitchell said quietly. But I'll have you know that there are no signs of foul play, so you have nothing to worry about. Natalie realized that the police officer had mistaken her frustration with herself as fear that someone was terrorizing students on campus. That had been the farthest thing from her mind, and deep down she knew that that was his indirect way of answering her question. Mitchell, an officer called from a few feet away, the mother just got here. This announcement caught Natalie's attention as she scanned the crowd of people outside the dorm. Her eyes stopped on a petite woman with short brown hair, wearing a pair of plaid pajama pants and a Brooks Point University mom sweatshirt. Natalie had met Noreen Payne on numerous occasions, from family weekends to trips to Darren's hometown of Baltimore, just 30 miles down 695. Officer Mitchell crossed over the police tape and made his way to Noreen, with Natalie and Priya hesitantly following. Natalie wanted answers, and she figured this was the only way to get them. Mrs. Payne, I'm Officer Mitchell. A single tear fell down Darren's mother's cheek as she did her best to stay composed. Will someone please tell me what's going on, she pleaded. The other officers just keep offering me a ride to the police station so we can talk there. Where's Darren? Ma'am, please. Mrs. Payne was suddenly aware of Natalie's presence, and the tears on her puffy, discolored face told her that this was more serious than she had feared. Natalie, what happened? Natalie knew she couldn't be the one to tell her. Her heart already felt as if it had been tossed on the ground and stomped on, and she had only known Darren for a little over a year. She couldn't bear the thought of telling Darren's mom that her only son was dead. It didn't feel real yet. She was still waiting to wake up from this nightmare. Mrs. Payne, Officer Mitchell started gently. He pulled her to the side, and Natalie stood to the side trying to regain her composure. Be strong, Natalie, she told herself. If not for you, then for Darren's mom. The shriek that suddenly came from a few feet away told Natalie that Officer Mitchell had told Mrs. Payne the truth. No, not my baby, Noreen cried, collapsing to the ground in tears. Natalie's heart had her running over to comfort the crumpled woman before her mind even had a chance to decide. She crouched down next to Mrs. Payne and put her hand on her shoulder, crying right alongside her. I'm so sorry, Natalie sobbed. It was all she could think to say, but as the words fell off her tongue, she knew how lame it sounded. As she pondered what else she could possibly say, a group of police officers and campus patrol gathered in front and started directing students away from the building. A campus patrol officer held a megaphone in front of his face, preparing to address the displaced students. The first and second floor will be split between Frederick Hall and Prescott Hall for the night, he began. The third, fourth, and fifth floors will be going to Rogers Hall and the apartments. The residents at Harrison Hall followed the officers from the area in front of the building, Priya and Allie among them. They had puzzled looks on their faces but showed no objection to being taken away from an active crime scene. Natalie opted not to go. There was no use. She already knew she wouldn't be getting any sleep tonight. Thank you.